Fireside chat. We'll get started. We do have a question that was sent in advance for both of you, and you can certainly choose who will answer first. Carbon capture technology plays a crucial role in Alberta's energy sector, yet it faces challenges beyond capital costs. You both have had a front row seat to the evolution of this industry. So, a question for both of you. Excluding capital costs, what specific challenge related to carbon capture do you see as particularly pressing, and what potential solutions or strategies would you recommend addressing this challenge effectively?
You want me to start? You want me to start with this one? Is this working? You just have to. I gotta turn on. See, I'm out of practice. I haven't had to speak at as many of these things. Is it still hard? Oh no, it's a different one. Go ahead. It's good. You're good. Okay. I'm out of practice. I haven't had to speak at as many of these things, and I do have some questions in the fireside chat to ask the minister. But I guess they weren't going to let me off the hook without answering a couple of questions. And I'm glad it's about carbon capture because that's probably an area that's near and dear to my heart, and it goes back a long way, even before politics. I was involved in some of the early projects that Enbridge had around CCUS back in 2009. So CCUS isn't a new technology; it's been around for a while. But where it's really taken off is over the last 5 years or so, as decarbonization plans come in across North America and across the globe. And in Alberta, we saw this as a huge opportunity to not only lower emissions and decarbonize existing industries, but as an opportunity to attract investment into new and growing industries, whether it's gas-fired generation coupled with carbon capture, whether it's cement, whether it's hydrogen. There's a huge opportunity there. So in Alberta, we went with the option, and we awarded 25 hubs across the province, across every single corner of the province, to decarbonize every sort of incumbent activity and industry, as well as attract new investment. So what are the challenges, and where are these hubs at? Because nothing's in service or built to date. And this isn't a phenomenon that's only in Alberta, but it's globally, it's across North America. There's 17 CCUS projects across the European Union. I learned just last week at Sarah Week that every single one of them is stalled. The United States, which has surpassed Canada in number of projects on the books because of the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, with over $400 billion of incentives thrown out in the United States, is actually stalled in the US too. And it's more around trying to get the permitting and regulatory process straightened out. But here in Alberta, that's not our problem. We have a mature, proven regulatory process that was put in over 10 years ago in 2010. And we've got full life cycle regulator in the AER to regulate this, with directives and well understood processes. But in Canada, it's different. It's the political uncertainty that's causing these projects not to proceed. It's the ability to be able to compete financially with the United States. Under the IRA that I just mentioned, they're offering $85 a ton per every single ton of carbon that's sequestered. In Canada, we have a very, very complicated, complex wave of incentives from both federal and provincial, starting with the federal investment tax credit that pays a portion of the capital costs. On top of that is the new Alberta CPIP program, a 12% grant for capital, and on top of that is carbon pricing, the ability to create sequestration credits, carbon credits, and sell them on the market. And if we have the carbon pricing and those credits with a predictable value, then we're competitive with the United States. We can attract that. We can attract capital. We can get these projects to financing. But there's so much uncertainty over the price of carbon, what happens with the carbon credits, the sequestration credits, what happens with industrial carbon pricing, what happens with the next election, then nothing's moving forward without carbon contracts for difference. And that's where we're stalled again. Federal government has put out a $7 billion program through Canada Growth Fund to backstop carbon pricing, carbon contracts for difference under these projects, but has only landed on one contract to date. So a lot of these projects are stalled pending political uncertainty and some certainty on the price of carbon.
Great answer, and all I will add to that is we're waiting to see what the federal government comes forward with in their budget in the next couple of weeks, whether they're actually put their money where their mouth is, and we'll see what happens there. And the challenge within my ministry in terms of CCUS is that it's parasitic to load. So if you're generating 1,000 megawatts and then you put carbon capture on there, you can only generate 960 megawatts. So it takes out your capacity. And when we're trying to get as much electricity dispatchable to market, it's a technical problem, but it's a problem that we're facing. So a couple of things like that. But the biggest one is, where is the federal government going to land on this budget, and are they going to come through to make some of these possible?
Well, and another thing, it falls squarely in your area, is the clean electricity regs. So we have projects here in Alberta, incumbent gas-fired generators who would consider and would like to put carbon capture on their generators, but even if they could find a way to make it financially viable, the clean electricity regs as drafted make it impossible to do that. Yeah. So it's been counterproductive. The federal government is the one saying we want to get to decarbonization. We want to see carbon capture go forward. We want to see net neutral gas generation, but it's their own regulations that are standing in the way.
And just to clarify what Sonya means on how the CER stands in the way from that is, they basically said your carbon capture has to be above 90%. The current global technology is maybe at about 60%. And while you can engineer on paper something approaching 90, if you don't hit 90, you don't get any of the carbon credits, like zero. So a typical carbon capture on electricity generation in Alberta is $2 billion. And who wants to build a $2 billion capital asset that if you get to 89.9%, it's a failure and you don't get anything for it? So that's where we told the federal government, this is not workable. We're not just being ignorant and stamping our feet and having a tantrum. We're just trying to ask them to grasp reality. If there was a payment, if you hit 89 and you could pay to get to 90, or if you hit 85, they would do it. But there isn't that structure, and that's what
and
the
they're
sign
not
means.
They don't seem to be bending. They don't seem to get it. Now, I think imposes a real problem for some of the incumbent generators. I know there's some new technology on some smaller units that would maybe generate 200 to 300 megawatts coming out of different technologies and in the States and across, even some coming proposed here in Alberta that might be able to get to 90-95% capture. But it's are you seeing any movement from the federal government on these issues?
No, unfortunately, with the budget, it seems to be a little bit of gamesmanship now. Obviously, their focus is on something different, and then depending whenever we get to a federal election, we're not sure what that runway is or how they'll approach that time frame that they have left. We've heard different things, from them trying to ram it through early to them trying to strike a deal with the federal NDP to extend the federal election a further year out so that they go the full 5 years instead of just 4.
Lord.
Yeah. Now, Catherine, do I get to ask some questions? Or do you have some more?
No, that was the only one.
Oh, excellent. See, I'm lucky now. I get to sit in this seat and ask questions as opposed to sit in that seat and have to answer them. So, but Nathan Minister Neudorf is a very good friend of mine, so of course I'm going to be very easy on you and ask the more fun questions, because I think you covered beautifully and adequately so many of the things that you're working on a tough portfolio. My view is probably the toughest portfolio in the government right now, where you're dealing with complicated subject matter and issues, and then complicated issues where you're doing massive policy work on, from affordability and reliability to trying to reach some decarbonization goals, watching the demand on the grid expand with more industry. And I guess the first question I would have for you, how are you coping with all of that? And what have I missed?
Well, demand side management, and the Premier's asked me to consider a water utility as well.
Another thing on your
another
agenda.
thing on the list. And
How did you get that one?
Yeah, because apparently the city of Calgary doesn't monitor their water well, and there's up to 30% leakage within the system. And after your third year of drought, heading into a fourth year of drought, wasting water is not something Albertans want to hear about. So we might have to look at how we manage that. But yeah, I prefer to use the term complex, not difficult, because I wouldn't want to be in Adriana Lagrange's shoes in health. That is a very challenging file as well. But you're right, it is very complex. And for those of you who weren't aware, before Minister Matt Jones was sworn into this portfolio, utilities or electricity wasn't its own ministry. Dale Nally and Sonya Savage were the last two ministers in that file, where Dale Nally was an associate minister under energy, and Sonya took care of it all under the umbrella of energy, energy. So again, as we've dug into it, industry is very ready for a government willing to take some responsibility and help them modernize a system that served us well, but was developed 25 years ago, before renewables were even really a thing, let alone geothermal, biomass, energy storage, and all the other complexities. So it's been a lot of reading and a lot of meetings, and I'd like to tease Brett, because I know him, but how many times have we seen each other in the last 10 months? It's more than a couple.
Oh yeah, as often as you're willing.
That's true. I like the loud outfits, so it's as many times as we can. But there's a lot of people in the industry, and in all sincerity, they've invested a lot of time and a lot of money, and there's a lot of people employed, that they deserve a government that's actually going to address it in a responsible way, and not be I'm looking for the right word, not be flippant. That these policies and decisions are extremely powerful, and that it could quite literally impact the trajectory of not only a business, but thousands of individuals' lives for the next 50 years.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that there is a full portfolio for electricity and utilities, and it definitely, things have changed. Just for instance, I just came back from Sarah Week in Houston. It used to be called the Olympics of Oil and Gas, but this year there was equal attention, equal amount of time given to electricity and the grids, and the need for grid expansion across the United States, across the world. And one thing that stood out, aside from just the need to expand the grid, was for the very first time ever, the issue of artificial intelligence has entered into the narrative in a big way, and it was woven into most of the sessions, both as an opportunity and as a challenge. As an opportunity in that it's the ability for improved efficiencies and technological improvements in the grid, in managing the grid and in oil and gas wells, but also a challenge because artificial intelligence takes a lot of electricity. A data center uses twice the electricity. And I think it was Bill Gates in his session said they are installing every 3 days globally a new AI data center. The amount of electricity to power that's enormous. And so I'm wondering, what are you hearing or seeing in Alberta around AI and how it might impact the grid?
Yeah, it is definitely an identified opportunity. And we see electrification everywhere. I mean, who doesn't have a cell phone? I've got 3 myself, so I seem to collect them with every new job. But whether it's your television, whether it's your refrigerator, whether it's your entire system, we are using more electricity all the time. and therefore AI and data centers is also increasing, as well as cryptocurrencies and bit mining, and everything is using more and more electricity all the time. So we're watching that growth. And Alberta is in the enviable position that by the end of this year, we will have more dispatchable generation than our peak load for the first time in a long time. And that's tremendous. Now, we have some units that are getting older and getting close to retirement, so we want to continue to bring on new generation to continue to manage that. It's one of the reasons why we're talking about small modular reactors and conventional nuclear, because we want to combine two goals: increase generation output and lower emissions. And there was a question earlier about what about hydro from an individual. Alberta has very limited hydroelectricity generation possibility. Just our geography, our landscape, we've got few sites that can do it. And the sites that we can do it, depending on the size, it could be somewhere between $10 billion or $20 billion for a hydroelectric dam to generate 600 megawatts of electricity. That's really expensive. An SMR, we hope at some point can get somewhere in that $5 billion range to generate 300 megawatts. So $10 billion gets you 600. And it would be less than the size of this room, an SMR. So environmental impact, landscape impact, First Nations involvement in where it hits geography and landscapes. The return on investment is a very big part of the conversation. And we are looking at those kind of opportunities. And then conventional, in comparison to SMRs, there are some calculations that say the dollars per megawatt for conventional is less than that for SMR. So the example that we've sort of been working on, and these are really rough numbers, is that a 6,000 megawatt conventional nuclear facility could cost $85 billion. But that's 6,000 megawatts, and I shared with you the 6,000 megawatt chunks of our grid. So it's pretty meaningful. At 300 megawatts for an SMR, we need to build 20 of those. And at 5 billion a piece, which we haven't hit that price yet, some people say it's closer to 15, but at 5 billion a piece, that's $100 billion. So there's pros and cons. I think we need to look at both. I think we need to choose the right technology for the right situation. I think we need to work with Albertans and work with the industry to say if, when, where, how. And then we also need to introduce the demand side management, which reduces our consumption. So we don't have to build as much as quickly and still get the same kind of returns for Albertans.
I love where the conversation is going on nuclear, and I just love where it's going. When we started out with the MOU with Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Ontario, it was always understood that this is, at that time, with 2020, 2021, it would be a private sector, probably in the oil sands, where we would see SMRs. Now we're seeing Capital Power with a MOU, and we saw in the reports recently tabled to you from the ISO, it was the ISO, might have been the MSA, but a comment there on potential procurement opportunities and contractual mechanisms that the government might have. I'm wondering whether there's, you know where I'm going, whether there's any thoughts that the province of Alberta might be looking at investment in an SMR. Of course, they're massively new and risky for the private sector, but is this something that the province might look at under procurement and contractual mechanisms?
This is where I have to decide whether I get to play coy and say, stay tuned, or we're working on different things. We've got a very exciting announcement hopefully coming out by the end of this month that I can't share any more on at this point. The actual challenge for us is because we have an open market and we have private enterprises generating electricity, the very exciting opportunity is how does Alberta, not if Alberta would invest, but how does Alberta invest and yet still maintain that private entity, private market? We've got a couple of really exciting ideas, and this is where my job is very exciting and fun, is I get to call up our generators, our transmitters, and our distributors and say, come to a private room, sign a non-disclosure, let's have a chat with all the gloves off, with no media attention, and say, let's dream about the future together and how can we collaborate all together to get the best outcome. We've just started having some of those conversations. And again, the ingenuity, the pride in Alberta, the strength of our industry and our economy, and the trust that we've been building since your time in this portfolio is tremendous. And when you get that happening, you get that synergy and excitement and spark in the room. That's how we put a person on the moon. Like we can do it. It just takes, where there's a will, there's a way. And these are the conversations I think Albertans need to know that the government is having with our industry, because we all want to see a future for our kids and our grandkids. And we're starting to have those conversations now, and a lot more will come out this calendar year, so people don't have to wait decades for this news. But we're working through that process appropriately right now.
Very cool. I'd like to ask you a question about energy storage. We're seeing lots of applications of energy storage in the United States, and lots of interest here in Alberta, and the opportunity that would have to link and combine with critical mineral development, resource extraction and development, whether it's lithium from brines or cobalt, and the opportunity to combine some of that. We're seeing globally, we're seeing supply chains and a need in North America to develop North American supply chains, right from critical minerals to processing of rare earths and critical minerals, to battery production, to solar panel production, manufacturing of turbines here, as well as grid grade batteries. I'm wondering what you see for opportunities for energy storage in Alberta, because I see it, if we can get the supply chain, the integrated supply chain right across North America, we can beat China. We can onshore this activity. We can create new integrated markets, and with Alberta at the forefront with our natural resources. Absolutely,
and I think it's another huge opportunity. I think we passed Bill 22 under Dale Nally, or was it under you?
Was it Minister Nally?
Minister Nally. So Bill 22 allows for a lot more of that. It took a lot of time. Some other political things happened in the meantime.
Just a few.
To get that proclaimed about 4 weeks ago. And that provides,
yeah, well done. Congratulations.
Yeah. So that took a lot of internal conversations because the concerns of this about battery, particularly the lithium ion, costs a lot. Now, it doesn't cost as much as it used to, and it will continue to come down. So I think there's a ton of application within our Alberta grid if we do it right. It's not going to be the answer for every solution, and one of the limiting factors of batteries is the more that you use them, the more that they cycle, the less strength they retain. So it's kind of an investment of diminishing returns. And while we look at other similar jurisdictions, being California and Australia, their climates are very, very different, and I think a lot more supportive for batteries in a broader way, which is why I think you see batteries being built in those two jurisdictions at the rate they are now. It's not cheap, but it's not as expensive as it once was, but it's still not cheap. But I think as we do better planning, we look at it through the lens of optimization and efficiency, we can very clearly identify where we need to put them for what reasons. And there's a lot of situations, for example, Waterton in the southwestern part of the province. There's one main transmission line that goes out to Waterton, but there's normally like a loop because you like redundancy in electricity in case of a forest fire, which once in a while happen, I hear, in Alberta. Where's the fire retardant guys? Fire mesh. We got to get more of that out there. Anyways, so some jurisdictions like that, which is less expensive, putting some storage out there or building another transmission line? There's consideration to be had. So there's a lot of applications where batteries really do make a lot of sense, and we'll see that adopted more. There is a high focus on affordability, so we have to be very thoughtful in where we put them. So it's not a panacea, but I think as we adopt that and continue to develop that industry, it's something every government wants, that diversity in economy will continue to grow, and we're excited about the potential, because then we can also support our neighbors to the east and west and north and south, and we have an abundance of uh, natural resources that we have not fully utilized yet.
Well, and with that, your ideas on where you could cite batteries, would the same go for natural gas generation? Some of these smaller units that do 200 to 300 megs of generation, you could potentially site them anywhere close to transmission lines. We're seeing applications that would be coupled with CCUS, so net zero gas generation, smaller units. Having to get to FID and project and financing can be challenging, and it can be a struggle for some of these companies. Where do you see the province fitting in there, and how can we make some of these things move forward more quickly?
Yeah, a really great question, because what the federal government often forgets is that we do have rural, remote communities within Alberta, within Canada, many places. And in fact, a lot of our First Nations reserves in Alberta are rural and remote. And going to natural gas, would be A, cleaner, B, more affordable, and C, something that they could actually attain, because they're either using oil or propane, or they don't actually have reliable electricity at all. So energy security in Canada, I know, and sometimes in downtown Ottawa, it's easy to forget that there are things called trees and rivers, but a lot of people live out there. And it is within my mandate letter, and we're working with 5 First Nations communities right now to get them natural gas that they don't have. And getting them natural gas, again, would get them off a more carbon intensive burning for electricity and heat, as well as giving them that energy security that they need so that they can develop their own economies and their own communities, which is really important to them. So not everybody's at the same place, even in a wonderful country like Canada. And I think that's something that the federal government forgets. They get trapped in their ivory towers, and they should come out and visit the prairies once in a while and see what some terrific people have to face. And that's what I'm asking all Albertans, where we have some pretty incredible luxuries in our cities. Some communities don't have heat. Quite literally, they're still burning wood, or maybe oil. Some are still burning coal. So we want the benefits that we have for all Albertans, and in an affordable, sustainable way. And that's still an increase or a step forward in reducing our carbon emission.
Do we have time for a question on hydrogen? Hydrogen?
Sure.
This is another opportunity that I think is huge for the province. But I did notice and I heard the same down in Sarah Week in Houston last week. But I noticed in the ISO report said there are, while hydrogen is challenging, there's cost. The cost of it is just as challenging. Heard that down in Sarah Week, and see some U.S. companies kind of backing away from hydrogen as we're trying to get the price down. And we saw that on the East Coast, when the same week that Sarah Week was down in Houston, our federal minister was over in Germany announcing a green hydrogen deal for hydrogen that we don't even have. When the world is saying, you know what, it's the affordability of it just is not there financially for even blue hydrogen, let alone green hydrogen. And promptly after returning, they had people off Newfoundland saying, if we're going to produce electricity, green electricity, we're not going to use it to make hydrogen. We need it for other applications. But where do you think within all of that, I still think it's a very bright future for hydrogen. It's just the financial, bridging that gap on the finance can be difficult. Where do you see this going?
So I agree. I think there are some challenges, but there's actually some amazing companies in Alberta that you may not have heard of. And I wish I had a full list of them. There's quite a few. Aurora is one of them. I think it's Aurora Hydrogen, and they have some proprietary technology that allows them to take natural gas, convert it into hydrogen and physical carbon fiber, and they can use the carbon fiber, sell that, and that offsets the cost for hydrogen, making it more economical. So our challenge right now is the infrastructure. I think at this point, proposing additional hydrogen lines, because hydrogen can't flow through the same lines of natural gas for all kinds of molecule size questions and corrosion and different things like that, gets highly technical. How we solve that is still being debated. But if you could put a conversion unit at the end of a natural gas line and use that hydrogen to burn in our electricity generations, and thereby starting at, say, 15% blend hydrogen to natural gas, getting that up to somewhere around, I think technology within the next decade could get us to about 80% blend. That's a massive reduction in carbon emissions. If we can use the physical carbon to offset the cost of that hydrogen, so it's roughly the same price as natural gas, that's a benefit, so that you're keeping that affordability. And they're commercializing this technology in Alberta right now. And that allows for a huge number of possibilities going forward. You can most easily apply it to, like I said, natural gas electricity generators. Then you can apply it to hydrogen fueling stations by utilizing our natural gas backbone. Hydrogen in communities and appliances is a little bit more technically challenging and a little bit behind that. So again, I think the ingenuity, the innovation and technology, we're on the cusp of some major breakthroughs on that. And while the federal government lives in some other Netherland, we actually have people in Alberta that are actually doing this and providing either carbon for fertilizers and nutrients for our soil, carbon for our steel industry to be able to build things. Ironically, carbon can be used in the blades for wind turbines. I think we're getting there, and I think the transformation that we'll see in the next 5 years will again put Alberta solidly in the lead globally for an emerging technology.
Well, that's awesome to hear. And one last comment. I am very glad that you're in that portfolio because I think it's well managed. I think you've got your eye on the future, your eye on the interests of Albertans, and I think you're handling it masterfully with all the disparate stakeholders with competing views. I think you're doing a tremendous job.
Thank you.